All right, today's a mini episode of the Direct Response Podcast. I'm here with David, as always, from Wealthy Inbox. How's it going, bud?
Hey, it's all good, man.
Yeah, so we just recorded an episode about authentication and why it's so important. And, we use the analogy of it's like the building permits for your email business, right? So if you want to know all about email authentication, definitely check out our last episode. But if you're here for one authentication process in particular, which is DMARC, we're going to run down just the prerequisite for that, as well as our favorite ways to do that and sort of what our strategy is. So, David, what are the quick prereqs before someone gets started on DMARC?
Yeah, so I think people will swap the typical three authentication methods or name tags that Google wants to see on your email shirt. DKIM, SPF, and DMARC, right? DKIM and SPF, they come before, all right? DKIM and SPF, those records need to be set up first. You got to get those name tags in place first. DMARC is the third step, not the first, not the second. So that's something that is really important to understand, because if you mess it up, you can pull a previous David who once sent one of his very first clients all of his emails into spam. It was terrible because I ignored the first two steps. So as far as DMARC, this is the thing that you do in order to help Google verify that your identity isn't compromised and people aren't trying to send emails from your domain. So that's like the very beginning of this all.
It's kind of like the air traffic controller of certified versus uncertified mail is another way to think about it. Telling where the plane should go and how they should land. So
exactly.
if you're unfamiliar with DMARC in general, just to run down a real quick thing, it sets a policy for the mailbox provider, Google, Yahoo, Comcast, everyone in the world, what to do if you don't have that name tag that David was talking about, right? So if you don't have the name tag, what should happen to the mail? And there are three levels. None, which means don't do anything, but here's an email. You should send me a report about what's happening so I can see who's trying to send as me and identify, is that actually a real service of mine that I've blessed to send as me, or is that someone pretending to be me? Great place to start. I think, David, you have a strategy where you usually set that for 45 days or so when you have a new client. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually set P equals none to 45 days, rule of thumb. If they're a smaller sender, so if you're only sending a few thousand emails a month, then I'm like, okay, then that would be 30 days. And the reason why we like to give it time is because we don't want to just throw this new employee into its job and not have enough data to make decisions on what's real and what's not real. So I like to give it 45 days because that's plenty of time for me to send emails, for Google and other inbox providers and the ESP to gather data around like my emails and sending them and authenticating them and all that jazz. So I give it 45 days and then I switch it to the third level, which is known as reject. And we did mention there are three levels, so we don't want to keep you in the dark on all of them. First one is none, which is what Travis was talking about. The second one is called quarantine, which, after 2020, that we all learned that word pretty intensely. And then reject. Quarantine means if someone is impersonating you or they think someone's impersonating you, that impersonation email will be sent to the spam folder. Reject means it's just not even going to be delivered. Like, it's kind of like throwing a paper airplane to your crush and the teacher just like swats it out of the air. So your crush had no idea that what you said or even that there was a message to start with.
That it was even in flight to begin with. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's not a specific childhood memory, but the analogy just came to my head. I just want to put that out there.
Sure, David. Sure. Just share your trauma on the podcast. It's all good.
It's no problem. Thanks. Just edit it out.
Sure.
But yeah, those are the three levels. And Travis, I mean, what situations would you describe for somebody who's putting this all together that they would use quarantine versus reject?
Yeah, so it really is, it comes down to a couple of things. So first of all, you need to be collecting data on what's happening. So a common mistake I see when people are trying to set up DMARC, since this is about how to set it up, I want to help you avoid the common pitfalls. Someone will just go in there and say, great, I say the v DMARC 1 or something or other, and I put p equals none. Great, all set, right? Well, no, because while you can set a policy that's ultra short and simplistic, and it will tell the mailbox provider what to do, it doesn't tell them where to send the report of what happened. And that is just as valuable as the directive or the policy that you've set, in my opinion. So you want to use a DMARC reporting tool. We have a free one for you, linked down in the description, that you can drop in a policy and it will automatically aggregate those reports and let you know what services, what your alignment is everything hunky-dory, or are you having serious issues, so that you can identify, hey, is there a service in this list of services that I see that I recognize? Like maybe I forgot to configure the name tags on my help desk system, but I did do it on my internal communication and for my email marketing. That is the purpose of it, right? It also allows you to see what are all these Russian domain, like sending sources of trying to pretend to be my domain, because that happens too, right? And so it allows you to see what is your risk profile and have you missed something important? And that's where quarantine is great, because if you want to see, like, first of all, you want to increase the level of security, so you go from none to quarantine, but you don't necessarily want to just break everything so people don't know it exists. Because if you set it to quarantine and all of a sudden you missed your help desk, and people are like, hey, I can't find your support stuff, and you start getting reports back, hey, I found it, but it was in spam, that is a clue before you get your report from DMARC that maybe one of your platforms was missed. And you still want them to be able to see it, even if it requires extra effort, because it's in spam, if it's a legitimate thing, so that you can then correct and modify each additional service. So that is where the in-between makes sense to me before you go full-blown reject. Once you've looked at the report and you've taken inventory of every system that touches your domain that sends email, and you've accounted and made sure every single one of them has credentials in that name tag proving that it's you, then I like to elevate to reject, knowing that everything went smoothly for a few weeks on quarantine. So now I can say, okay, if you're a Russian bot farm, or if you're, my competitor trying to slander me somehow, or whatever the situation may be, reject puts it on lock, but quarantine gives you an opportunity to correct without being completely detrimental. That's why I like to use kind of the layer cake of all three, just to kind of see what's what in the report.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. And the clients that I've worked with in the past and my newsletters themselves, they don't have those levels of support and internal systems and things like that. So if you are listening to this and you do have those processes in place and like different teams doing different things, maybe a P equals quarantine might be good for you as well. For me, I go off of my experiences, and most newsletter businesses that I look at acquiring, they don't have any of that. So that's something that I would use.
They have one service.
None. They have one service, exactly. So that's something that I would go none to reject. So really, it's up to you. So Travis, how would people set this up and do so the right way and do so as quick as they can?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, the prereqs are definitely the DKIM and the SPF. So go make a list about every service you think that touches your email service provider. Maybe it's Google Apps or Workspace for your internal stuff. Maybe it's, Help Scout or Zendesk for your support. And make sure that all of those systems have DKIM enabled and you've added SPF to your domain. Once you've done that, you can go to a variety of DMARC tools. We do offer a free one, which I've linked down below, where you just say, hey, this is my domain. Please generate a record for me. And when you do that, you can pick what you want the policy to be using a dropdown, it will spit out a little string that you then copy and paste into your domain. And that will not only set your policy, as we've mentioned, right? None, quarantine, reject, whichever you choose. But it will then also aggregate the report of everything that the mailbox providers are seeing and providing feedback on. And then you can get a weekly update about how much email went out, how much volume, what was the alignment, how well was it doing, who's sending ASME, so that you can take inventory of, even if it was rejected, is there someone pretending to try to be me, right? Is there a nefarious thing going on? And it's a glanceable way to digest what is otherwise really messy, intimidating, frankly, looking information about who's sending on your behalf in a nice, concise chart logos and bar graphs and the whole deal. So it's
I
really, if you
love
can
it.
copy and paste, you can set up a DMARC.
Yeah. And when we say copy and paste, we mean copy and paste into the DNS records of your domain provider. So if you bought a domain on GoDaddy, you go to GoDaddy, you go to the section that says Manage DNS, and it's going to have a bunch of like lines with a little bit of text and maybe a number with time attached to it that says 1 hour, 5 minutes, whatever. If you see that little stack of lines with like some weird text in it, you're in the right place. And that's where you copy and paste your DMARC records. And I do want to say, like, this stuff is important. And you might say, like, well, I'm a really small business, or we're a medium-sized enterprise, or even we're a larger enterprise, but we have good relationships with our competitors. Yeah. What's this? I don't know what the stat is, but most cyber attacks happen on small business owners. Like, I wouldn't mess around with this. Like, we're using jovial humor, right, to say, like, yeah, Russian bot farms and stuff like that. Yeah, but there's actually stuff out there that is trying to steal your customers' data and cause a lot of damage to you. So this stuff is important.
Well, you may have said that your example of the teacher and smacking down the airplane was a fake analogy, but my Russian bot thing was not. That was actually in the list of people pretending to try to be Canadian refinery. So you'll be amazed and blown away about who's going to try what from where. So having these things on lock is very wise and definitely, advised, but it is actually required if you're going to send more than 5,000 emails in a single day. So get on the bandwagon, do the 5 minutes of work, set up your free DMARC thing once you've done the DKIM and SPF stuff, and just get it done. It's not that hard. You'll be better protected. And as you scale and grow, that prereq to even be able to inbox at all at higher volumes will be in place and have a long-running history of doing things the right way.
Love it. And that's it. Go look at the article if you need more help underneath this, because that will give you like even more of a breakdown step by step. So that way, if you get confused, you can always refer back to it.
Yep. And if you want an ESP that can help you do that by default, of course, we have that. If you want just the DMARC piece and you're like, I don't want to use Campaign Refinery, I use, Klaviyo or Active Campaign or whatever, and I'm perfectly happy, fantastic. We still have a free DMARC tool that will help you get a better insight and report into what's going on there, even if you never use our other premium products. We just want you to be protected and have the data you need to make an educated decision. David, what do they do if they're trying to, do something with newsletters? Where do they go? What do they do?
So if you're looking to sell a newsletter to an investor, you can go to wealthyinbox.news, and it is my newsletter on how to dress up your newsletter and get it ready for investors. And by the way, part of this is having DMARC set up, because we don't want we're not going to buy a newsletter if there's a bunch of bot farms trying to impersonate it and mess up the data. So this is something that we actually do take seriously. So I talk about that and a bunch of other cool stuff inside of that newsletter. So go to wealthyinbox.news and you're going to hear a lot more of this New York accent in writing.
Yeah. And when buyers go do their due diligence, they're going to want to see exactly stuff like this squared away. Yep. So, David, You're the man. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Take care.